Next up, the likely battle for the bronze and the two favourites in that fight. Now, forgive me as the McLaren section is a little shorter. There's another full Drebrief on them from February you can watch if you want to see more. But for the first time in nearly a decade, the Woking factory is actually showing some promise of returning to something like their days in silver. It's easy to forget that a year ago they were begging their owners, the Bahraini royal family, for a loan just to keep the doors open. They had to cut 1,200 staff and put the rest on the UK's furlough scheme. Despite that, they had their best season since 2012, winning new fans over with Lando's increasing internet popularity and snagged a couple of podiums on merit. Losing Carlos Sainz is sad for the bromance fans out there, but they were able to bring in Daniel Ricardo, a man who shockingly wasn't mentioned enough in all those 2020 Driver of the Year discussions after kicking arse in his Renault leaving party. It'll be a fun yardstick for Lando Norris to see where he stacks up by comparison. He ran Carlos close, but Ricardo is a borderline top 3 driver in the world, and if Lando wants to be judged against the Verstappen and the Clerks in this new wave of elite Gen Z drivers, this will be his graduation test. The critics won't be so kind in year 3. But McLaren has done just about everything else right. Grab big name sponsors, raise more capital by selling a chunk of their team, got back into bed with an old 3-pointed flame to mitigate some of their newly green-coloured competition. That way they shouldn't lose so much on more power-dependent circuits. There's no guarantee it'll all be seamless to change an entire car to suit a new power unit. It did take them a year to really hit the ground running with Renault as their suppliers. I also think it's still a little optimistic to think of them as potential race winners. 2020 was a year where we had 3 cars essentially form a breakaway sport. It's what gave us 2 freakish wins and 13 different podium sitters, the most in 8 years. But if they can take advantage of others' inevitable errors and consolidate 3rd overall, that would be just fine. If you can bridge some of that incredible gap to the top 2, even better, because no one's done that since the V6 era's more aggressive aero phase. McLaren, most definitely a team on the rise again, but on a bit of a knife edge compared to those around them. That 3rd spot from 2020 should have gone to the artists formerly known as Racing Point. Aston Martin, when they were still 99% pink, had a more dramatic 2020 than just about anyone on the grid. A wildly popular, yet unpopular driver switch to bring in a 4-time world champion, but having to boot out a beloved, undisputed midfield icon in order to do it. They got docked 15 points for having illegal rear brake ducts. Both of your drivers contracted COVID-19 over the course of the season, one of whom won on holiday. And because the reserve driver was in Berlin trying to win the Formula E title, we all pretended to like Nico Hülkenberg again, standing in at the 11th hour. Twice. Turns out he was still pretty good too. You finally won your first Grand Prix since your car was painted yellow and owned by a self-proclaimed clairvoyant Irishman. And most importantly, you sold up and Aston Martin returns to the sport after 61 years on the shelf. Besides that, pretty quiet year. There's a lot to look forward to with this team. Sebastian Vettel isn't the pull it would have been 2 years ago, but if Otmar is giving him the keys to the castle, then look out, because that's when the German is at his best. There are understandable concerns about the move given how his Ferrari run ended. If you said to me you'd rather keep Sergio Perez, I wouldn't really argue with you. But I feel most of us watching will give him the benefit of the doubt, something the Germans never really had in his career until Ferrari's bad season made people realise, hey, maybe it's the team. And look, I'm often rather cynical. Intangibles are incredibly hard to measure in a sporting context. But I watched Aston Martin's car launch and Seb actually looked happy again for the first time in ages. I can't remember the last time he's been this optimistic since he first donned red. He and Otmar are saying all the right things, that his style is easier to manage, and that rumours of his rear end stability being needed were overblown. I don't know how much to truly read into it, but if they're faking it, they're very good actors. It's hard to talk about Lance Stroll fairly because he's so unmovable. He's played second fiddle to everyone else in the midfield. 2020 was no doubt his best year in F1 to date and was unlucky not to have won in Turkey from pole, but we need to see more of those days, or else people are still going to be cynical regarding the politics behind his job in the first place. It's year 5 for Lance and I'm still trying to figure out how good he is, and that's not ideal. He might still be a weakness in that camp. The whole camp might be victims of their own hype and excitement if testing was anything to go by. It's understandable that Aston Martin has got a lot of people pushing them to the moon, but they're going to face really stiff competition to reclaim their mantle as the kings of F1's middle class.